Well, Phil, I appreciate you jumping on here and letting us get a little perspective and insight into your life. Why don't you go ahead and just kind of introduce yourself and where you're located and your business?
Okay, my name is Phil Lipman. I am a real estate person. I have a company called Bright Properties in Tucson, Arizona, and we're located on Tucson Boulevard near Elm Street, which is the Blend and Elm historic neighborhood, in a building that we renovated last year. And basically, we do everything from real estate development to brokerage, rentals, property management, and everything in between.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I appreciate you being here, part of this interview. One of the reasons why we kind of do this meetup is to try to elevate positive stories or silver linings, if you will, because 2020 has been a little bit of a crazy year. So the community members are probably going to see this. They're going to want to engage and offer collaboration and support. And one of the things we like to do is kind of show how somebody got to where they're at now, and then how their perspective has helped them make it through 2020. So why don't you give us a little background into the life of Phil, where you started and how you got into real estate?
It's funny that you ask that question because I don't usually think about it, obviously, but I just had to write a little biography for our new website. And I started out by saying I started out in real estate in Cambridge, Massachusetts in 1986 and answered phones for $5 an hour, and also learned how to use computers in 1986 so that I could teach the realtors in the office how to use computers. It was before MLS listings used to come in a book that came out every 2 weeks, and we were the only company that had everything in a database. And I learned about it in 1986 and taught these people the people in my office how to use it. And a year later, I realized that they were all making like six figures and I was making $5 an hour, and that they were no smarter than I was. And I got my license and I became a rental agent and did very well. And I bought my first property and converted it into condominiums with two partners and made a little bit of a profit, moved on to the next one, and did that type of thing. And then I became a real estate agent, a sales agent the next year. And my first year, I was the number one guy in the office out of, 10 agents or something like that in Cambridge, Mass, which is a challenging, interesting market because all the people are Harvard, MIT, wealthy, smart, educated for 10 generations people. And so it definitely taught me to be on my toes and make sure I was telling the truth to people.
Nothing wrong with that. I like that. And
Yep.
we hear the word educated buyer all the time, but you were literally surrounded by educated buyers.
Well, I used to train agents and I would tell them, if you think you're going to make your living outsmarting millionaires, you're not going to make a living. So I learned a lot very quickly because I was dealing with people that spoke 10 languages and spoke English better than I did. And it was a good idea to give them as much information as possible and let them make the decision and not try to press my point of view on people, because I realized my point of view was somewhat irrelevant to their decision making,
Yeah. You have to kind of align in their thought. Otherwise, you kind of fall short. So I understand that. I like
Yep.
that you go from education and honesty first,
Yeah.
and kind of back into the needs of the client. It's important, especially now.
Well, at that point, there was no such thing as buyer agency in Massachusetts. It was, if you were representing a buyer, you were really representing the seller. So it was this very weird dynamic. And I figured out a way to just give them, I found, because of the computer stuff, I was able to find tons of information that other agents couldn't find, and I would just give it to them, and knew they were smart enough to do whatever they were going to do with it and make a smart decision, because that's how they ended up being like a full professor at Harvard at 29 years old. They didn't need my advice on what to do, but they really appreciated the fact that I wasn't a pushy sales guy and wasn't trying to deceive them.
No, I like that. I mean, you found a way to innovate and kind of give them exactly what you expected them to do, which was rise to the occasion.
Right.
It probably paid off, it sounds like. It's funny the way that we look at the world too, because back then, MLS in a book, 2 weeks, people had to go through and they had to actually view properties and they had to take their time. And usually it meant that they did a lot of upfront investigation. But now a house goes on the market and it could be gone within an hour because of
Right.
the activity and the information that's at our fingertips.
Right.
I mean, I think that's an interesting dynamic. And I think watching your business
Mm-hmm.
and in the way that it has evolved and the way that it's grown over the years, I
Mm-hmm.
feel like you've created this niche that kind of reaches beyond that. Because the whole concept of fast food real estate, give me what I want when I want it, you know what I mean?
Yep.
Is great. I mean, we need to be able to meet people's needs and their demands, but you and your team go a little bit beyond that. So what I want to kind of talk about is what took you from Massachusetts to Arizona, and why do you take such pride in the community there?
Well, so I basically worked for 12 years as an agent in Massachusetts and did a lot of development too. I did a lot of renovations. And after my second year, I realized that the only people I wanted to work with were the people I wanted to work with. And I went through my list. I was so burned out after my first year. I was the top guy in the office. And I went in for my evaluation, and the manager looked at me and she said, "You look like you need a blood transfusion. You're so tired." And I said, "Yeah." She said, "Do you know why that is?" And I said, "Because I don't know why, because I sold so much property." She said, "No, because you sold like way more property than anybody else, but you did the smallest price per unit of anybody else. So that takes a lot more effort because you're dealing with first-time buyers, you're dealing with inexperienced people, you're working so hard for so little money." And I basically got defensive and I said, "Hey, I want to help people, blah, 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 blah." And she said, "You can help people and sell them stuff that's bigger and it won't kill you. You can do both." And she told me to write down my goals. I did, and I made my goals that year and then thereafter. And we ended up being, the company was a local company. They were bought by a regional company called DeWolf New England. And there were 7,000 agents. And by the last few years, I was always number 2 or 3 in the whole company out of all these people. And this was before having 10 assistants and teams and cell phones. We were dealing with faxes and the landlines. So it was a burnout. It was a much more of a, I mean, if you're traveling, you'd have to find a toll booth, a phone booth to call your client, It was very different than now, but it really taught you how to hustle. And it also taught me, when I saw my list of people that I'd sold to the first year, there were 30 of them. And I realized that 10 of them were people that had not been that pleasant and had been, that it hadn't clicked for whatever reason. And I thought to myself, I wonder if I can make a living with just those 20 people supporting me. And I started sending them information that was useful information and postcards and mailings and stuff about interest rates and house prices and economic stuff and all that. And it became a career out of 20 people, just complete loyalty from a whole bunch of people for 12 years. And I had gone to school here in the 80s at the University of Arizona. So I always loved Tucson. I had this feeling that there's enough, I don't even know how to describe it, but there's more space and quiet in Tucson, Arizona than in Boston. Boston is very intense, very much. You can also work as hard as I was working and end up not banking a lot of money because you are working hard to pay for your lifestyle, which becomes a very expensive lifestyle in a place like that. And I realized, I'm much more interested in having a good lifestyle than, making the last nickel. So I had a building that was a 21 unit building near Harvard that I renovated. And after a year and a half or something, my partner and I were like, what are we going to do with the money this month? What project do we have? And we went through all the projects and realized we had done them all. And it was like, oh my God, we can actually keep the money this month. Incredible. It's like you almost forget that's why you were doing it. This building is from the 1870s, a big bow front Victorian building. And it was 21 apartments. It was neglected forever under rent control. It had not been touched. So everything inside and out, the porches were falling off, the clapboards were falling off. There was fake wood paneling over all the finishes. You had to tear it off, and drop ceilings, everything icky. And so the year we suddenly made some money, I thought, you know what, I deserve a year off. And where do I want that year off to be? I want it to be in Tucson. I've been visiting since I was out of school. And my best friend, who I just played music with this morning, actually, that I was telling you about, was living out here still and was just in college. or finishing. He was finished with college, and at that point was a firefighter. And I just thought, I want to go play some music with him. So I moved out here. I found a house in Sam Hughes, which I don't know how I fooled myself into believing it was a temporary thing since we bought a house, but we never looked back and never came home. So I've been here since '98. So that answers that question, yeah.
Yeah. It sounds like there was something longing and calling to you. I mean, you were working in an environment that was fast paced and a little condensed, it sounds like, and you did well, and you started to figure out a niche of loyalty and how to build that loyalty. But I mean, obviously there was something calling you to the Wild West, to the old Pueblo, where you could build strong loyalty and still feel like you've got room to breathe. I mean, that's a huge deal.
Well, also the after I bought my house, came back to Boston and started to pack up our stuff. On April Fool's Day in 1998, there was so much snow that the front awning of our house fell off into the middle of the street from the weight of the snow. And I thought, oh my God, this is God's will right here. This is like the message from heaven telling me, see you, Boston. Because it was relentless and brutal.
Yeah. Winters are a little bit less brutal in Arizona.
Yes.
Like less summer.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, beautiful. So, Bright Properties, from what I've seen working with you over the years, is kind of embodying exactly what it sounds like your experience has been, which is to give the clients a more educated approach towards the community. A lot of what you guys do tends to be around the historic value inside of the old Pueblo. And when you guys are selling things or working with new clients, I would assume that it's going to be a loyalty conversation, because when they're moving there, people that tend to move to Tucson tend to stay. So I feel
or come back later.
Or come back. It's the sand trap. You get out and come back.
Yeah.
So and I love that. I love that. I mean, you guys on your buildings have amazing murals that portray a lot of what the community is about and the culture. Tell me a little bit about why you enjoy doing that. Why do you embrace the community on the side of your real estate?
Well, I mean, for one thing, the one thing I know how to do that's a financially viable thing. I mean, I could be I'm a musician too, but I probably wouldn't be able to afford the iMac that I'm on talking to you if I had pursued that my whole life, right?
Yep.
So I know how to fix up old buildings, and the funny thing is that back in Cambridge, most buildings were literally 1870s through 1890s that I would deal with, or 1920 maybe at the latest for triple decker houses. But the reality is here, I mean, when I came here, I couldn't believe it. I fixed up a house on Elm Street near the Arizona Inn, which is close to where my office is now. And it was like a 1940s building, and people were like, why don't you just tear it down? And I thought, it just never would have occurred to me as a way to do it. Because I like restoring old buildings, and I like bringing them back to life and peeling them back to what they probably were to start out with. Not turning them into some modern flipper house type thing, but to actually get down to the bones of what the house was intended to be in the first place, or the apartment building. So I've done a lot. I've ended up falling into a niche where I've got one building from the 20s called Don Martin Apartments. That is an old Jostler was an old architect. It was an architect in Tucson that developed a lot of the foothills and Hacienda del Sol Resort. This building was done at the same time as Hacienda del Sol, and it feels like a Boston building. It feels like I'm right at home in a building like that because it's just what I grew up with, right? And then I've got a bunch of buildings that are from the 60s, which is something that I never had back east. And back there, they would be considered just like icky new buildings. And here they're considered historic buildings. So I've learned how to do sort of a mid-mod, bringing it back to the mid-century modern look and that whole sensibility. And I don't know, I find a sense of satisfaction doing that. I find that the tenants that I like having as tenants are the ones that are drawn to those types of buildings. I've had stuff near universities my whole career, but I've always catered to the more educated people that have an appreciation for historic buildings and aesthetics rather than just here to party. and a brand new building with a roof deck. I mean, there's different stuff that's around these neighborhoods, and it's kind of overwhelmed by that stuff at this point, but that's just never been anything I've ever been interested in. So it's pretty much the only thing I know how to do, Adam. That's it.
And that's all right. That's all right. We all have our trades, right? I tried a career in music and it failed. So here I am. Yeah. My brother and I tried a little bit and it didn't pan out.
It's hard. It's the
Yeah.
hardest.
So, but it sounds like your perspective from coming from Boston, where you were involved in remediating and building back up these historic buildings, panned out well in the old Pueblo, because you're picking up in Tucson, Arizona, these what a lot of the world would consider newer buildings.
Yeah.
You're able to kind of give this juxtaposition of modern and historic at the same time. So you're meeting the needs of people from all ages that are moving to Tucson. And I just love that. I love you. If you guys, anybody that's listening, if you guys want to go on to Instagram and follow, it's Bright Properties, right? Is it at Bright Properties? If you follow Bright Properties, you'll see some of these buildings. They are very well done. They're gorgeous houses. They're modernized, but they keep their historic relevance. And I think that jives well with the community. And I think your perspective allows you to kind of elevate that. And I love it. I think you guys go, like I said, beyond the sale. And one of the reasons why I think I might be speaking out of turn here, and I think you do that, is because you really enjoy and love Tucson and you want it to stay the community that you've grown to love. Am I wrong?
That's true. Actually, my favorite, I think my career high point was I had renovated the old kind of roadhouse apartment, like 1-story casita type thing. I think you insured it, right? The downtown Clifton.
Yep.
And this place was, even by my standards, horrible. I mean, basically there had been a suicide by cop event 2 years before we bought it, where a guy came out with a gun and was gunned down by like 8 cops in the middle of the parking lot. I mean, people were just like using the parking lot. There was an empty parking lot as just a big open bathroom. I mean, it was just crazy how bad it was and neglected. And I mean, none of the people had jobs. They all were partying starting at like 9 o'clock in the morning. It was a crazy dynamic. And we went through it, turned it into sort of a hipster, modern roadhouse type hotel, and it became it got a big buzz all over the country and all over the world, actually, for what it did. But one day it was about to open like 2 days after that, and there's this beautiful mural, that mural that's there, with it's by Danny Martin, who, if you ever want to see what Tucson's about, look up Danny Martin. He's an amazing muralist. And I drove by the building, and there was a police SUV in the driveway, blocking the driveway. And I thought, oh my gosh, how could we be in trouble already? We haven't even opened yet, right? Yeah. And it was the most involved looking vehicle. It had like literally 15 antennas sticking up. I was like, boy, what kind of trouble are we in here, right? And it was a female officer, and she had her phone out and was taking pictures of the mural or something. And I said, I said, is everything okay? I'm the owner. And it's a little alarming to see a very heavy duty police car in the driveway. What's going on? She said, oh no, I'm just taking pictures to send to my mother. I love what you did here. Mm-hmm. And I love the mural. And she said, the other thing is you have saved me a lot of work. And I said, what do you mean? She said, this place was the worst crime scene always. It's been this magnet for criminal people the whole time I've been on this beat in Ward 6. And, I haven't had a call since you took over this building. You guys have done an amazing job. And she said, what else do you do? And I told her what I do. And she said, well, what buildings specifically? And I told her, Broadway Village Apartments. And she said, you bought that in 2011, didn't you? I said, how would you know that? She said, because my phone stopped ringing in 2011. And then L6, same thing. It was like 2011, 2012. And she guessed the year I bought when I told her the building, she guessed the year off the top of her head, because she stopped having to hear about it as a nuisance to the community. So, and when it was over with, she looked at me, she said, now you should call your mother and tell her you had this conversation. And it was just like, it was a very heartening thing to get that kind of a reaction from the beat cop in the neighborhood, which is a neighborhood where there's tons of crime, so I thought that was good. And that kind of answers why I do it. I mean, it's like basically I see a thing that needs help, I fix it up, and it's miraculous to see the difference in the tenant profile, the care they take towards the building. People, when you put, it's sort of woo woo, but it's if you put the karma into doing the right thing with the building, the people that are drawn to it are people that are inclined to take care of it and appreciate it. Whereas if you do the wrong thing, it's the opposite. And that's, since I manage them myself, what would I prefer to have? Tenants who are excited to be there and are smart and take care of the property, or people who think that you're a slumlord and are doing a lousy job and they can break stuff and it won't matter. So that's why I do what I do, pretty much.
No, I love it. That story with the officer, that's just so surreal. I mean,
Cool.
it is a good story. It is an exact example of what I've seen. I mean, generally speaking, when I see that you've picked up a property and I know you're going to renovate it, I have to go and see it before the facelift.
Oh yeah, you see all the ugly. Yeah.
I get to see it when it's still in disarray. And sometimes when you're in a position like that, it's hard to remind yourself that all the effort you're putting in will have a positive outcome, but it's not just for that building. I mean, like take downtown Clifton. That building you guys renovated, and it was in magazines, it was on articles, the news was reported, it was all over the place, which was insane. It was gorgeous, and around it was still kind of in disarray. But since then, the rest of the neighborhood is really elevated and kind of matched to it.
Well, the same thing with Don Martin Apartments, and the same thing with Broadway Village Apartments, and even L6. These were always the worst thing in the neighborhood that were, like, I know because Tucson's such a small town, I have friends that like lived near Broadway Village Apartments in the 80s with his parents and his grandparents. He said literally every crime that was ever committed in that neighborhood was generated by Broadway Village Apartments. And now it's a gated, mid-mod, groovy thing that people love. There's no crime coming from it ever. So it's cool. It's a good feeling. It's a very odd business model, but it's the only one I actually know how to do. So.
Well, I'm sure that it's panned out. I mean, 2020 has been nothing short of being spectacular for causing tumultuous failures on people or stress, undue stress. But I think because of the way you've built your involvement in the community, your pride in your properties, I'm sure that there's still a ton of stress owning and operating real estate. But I feel like the loyalty is there. And I feel like people are going to want to maintain a confident and committed community. And I think you're giving them that, honestly.
Well, the good thing is that it's really branched out so that now we even have good sales listings. We have a house on Elm Street near the Arizona Inn for 1.35 million. That's a beautiful, beautiful house owned by a friend of mine. And when we had just had a baby, and I told her, I know you want to move, but I'm definitely not the guy right now because I have this brand new baby and I'm not sleeping and I'm not going to my office because of the pandemic and blah, 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 blah. And she just waited for me. When it was over, as soon as she saw a video of my daughter looking halfway sentient, she was just like, okay, let's do this. So we're selling that, and we're meeting all sorts of interesting people, and it's in our neighborhood where our office is. And we've got a variety of different stuff. We've got a building in Patagonia that's for sale, which is a cool mixed-use retail kind of a place, and a piece of land we're trying to sell that's a permitted commercial piece. So we've done all sorts. We've over the years we sell a lot of property. We've been pigeonholed a little bit as a property manager because of all my projects. But the reality is every year we have dozens and dozens and dozens of sales. And like I said earlier, I mean, that's something I've known how to do very well since the mid 80s. And I'm just kind of coming back to it now and enjoying it more now. And have a great staff of agents who are eager to get more business. And they're doing an amazing job. It's been really interesting and fun to see it evolve, Even in the pandemic, it's like sort of blowing my mind. It's great,
That's awesome, especially the fact that such a high-end client is willing to wait for you. I mean, that's usually at that level, it's I need it gone now. I can't wait. But that shows just the class and the community commitment to you that you built. And that's loyalty.
It's the only thing that you have if you do this type of work. I mean, that's the one thing I always like to say is that the whole thing about outsmarting people, that being a mentality of a lot of agents where they think they can just like, it's like a con. You can keep them believing you're being honest and nice up till the point where you have their money and then you can just discard them. That's the way a lot of sales agents seem to think. And, you know, my whole business was built on long-term relationships when I was in Boston. And it's the same thing here. And I don't really know any other way to do business, but I think it's actually a much better model for actually how to do better financially too, because you're not having to wake up every morning wondering if you have a job, wondering if the phone's going to ring, or somebody who feels like they were deceived by you is in a house and they suddenly realize that it was the wrong decision for them and that you encouraged them to do it because you wanted money as the agent. I mean, that's how agents think a lot. And I really pride myself in surrounding myself with agents and people in my office who don't think that way at all and really do think about the client's interests. And I thought it was interesting that you actually picked up on that when we talked about it the other day. Because I don't walk around preaching this or anything like that. It's just the way we do it. But you immediately were talking about this as the main thing about Bright Properties. I thought that was great. So.
Hey, I'm just pointing out what you put out there, Phil. It's all you. It's the commitment to your community and the way you guys have built your niche and your involvement is fantastic. I mean, we see it in the properties, we see it in your staff and in your team. I mean, they are stellar.
Yep.
And then I love watching you and your wife play music, man. I do. I like listening to it and watching that, because to me that is another step where you have submerged yourself into something that you're taking pride in. And it's not the music genre or anything like that. It's the fact that you're willing to display your art to the members of the community. And I feel like that makes people feel so much more connected to you than somebody who's just a sales agent.
Well, that's fun. I sure hope one of these days all the venues that we usually play at open up again so we can play some more gigs, because it is the funnest thing in the world. We also, like I said, have a new kid, so it's not exactly like we're going out at night doing anything at all, which you're familiar with, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Hibernation phase is happening now, so we've been offered gigs and it's been like, I don't think we're doing that right now.
No, the time will come for that again, you know, especially the world will get back to a relative normal, I think, with that going out and enjoying the community and enjoying venues like what you and Beth do. But yeah, right now you have to take care of your family. And I know you've got your own personal family, your kids and your wife, and then you've got your family at Bright Properties and your team. You've got to take care and respect their needs, right? Because that's a hard thing to balance in a pandemic. And then you take care of the community by making sure they feel confident that you're still there and you will continue to still be there.
Well, it's the bare minimum you can do, right?
Well, some people don't believe that, but yeah, no, I agree with you. So is there anything you would like to share with the members of the LinkedIn community or just the world in general about something that you've got going on, or any last minute thoughts on 2020 leading into 2021?
I guess I just think it's a pretty interesting time. I've been through, when I started in real estate, interest rates were like 18%. And the first sale I ever had, this is a good thing to tell people. If you're new in real estate and you think that real estate is one thing and the economy is another thing, or the stock market is another thing, guess again. It's all interrelated in a way that even more so now than when I was a kid. But basically, I would say that my first sale was 1987. On the date of, I don't remember the date, but it was sometime around this time of year, and it was called Black Monday. Do you remember that, or do you ever read about it? And basically, it was the day the first big giant stock market crash happened, where it was like hundreds of points. There was hundreds of points, and it meant a lot because it was a small average at that point. But basically, I had my very first closing was supposed to close for a $400,000 house, and I was going to make my first commission, and I was broke. I mean, I had like literally been living on fumes for months waiting for this to happen, and had stopped doing everything else that earned a paycheck to be a sales agent, only I had no sales. So it was, a new agent. So The guy was a judge. He went to Fidelity to go get his money for the closing, and they said, your money doesn't exist anymore.
Ugh.
And of course, what that filtered down to me was the closing was canceled. The seller was irate. Everybody was very, very nervous and freaked out. And the good news was that a day or two later, it all recovered and his money was there again. But that was the day the little light bulb went off for me that it's all connected, and real estate is just an extension of the actual economy, and also the confidence or lack of confidence, depending on the day, on what's happening. And it became like between 1987 and 1992 or something, it was just a giant downward spiral after that. So I started from the word go in a plateau of a peak of a market that everybody was like, oh yeah, this is what it is, this is what it is. And I one time showed a house to somebody whose dad ran a big mutual fund newsletter, was a famous, stock market guy. And it was this, he asked about this house and I said, blah, 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 blah. And he said, yeah, I don't think there's going to be a spring market this year. And I said, what do you mean? He said, my dad says that this is it, that we've reached a peak and the ice is cracking and people just don't see it yet. But the other expression is the dog whistle, that the buyers hear and the dogs hear, but the agents and the sellers never hear it. And I think there's a bit of a dog whistle happening here. I don't know about for residential. I think there's a lot of good dynamics for Tucson for residential, but I think for investment properties, people are so eager to get money out of the stock market and get it into what they consider to be a safe situation. A lot of California buyers, a lot of people from all over the country are finding Tucson, and it is cheaper and it is better financially to buy an apartment building here than it is pretty much anywhere else in the country right now. But this to me feels a lot like when I started in 1987. This feels like an artificial peak where there's money being pumped into the economy. There's all sorts of stuff going on that's politically trying to make the economy look as good as possible for at least a little while until there's an election. And I would just say, if you're thinking about buying, it won't kill you to wait a little bit. And there will be some time in the next couple of years where you'll find some good deals. Whereas right now, it feels like every property that comes on, there's 20 offers, and it's not like they're crazy expensive in Tucson. Tucson is still a very inexpensive place, but if you're making an investment, once you close on it, you own it. And it's the day you close is when you make your money or lose your money. So that'd be my advice, is just, if you can hang back and you don't need to do something, you might have more opportunities in about a year. That's what I think. That's just, it's gut instinct. It could be the kind of thing where you play this back to me in a year and everything's doubled in price and I'm totally wrong. But that's what I think right now.
No, I appreciate that. Some people are too afraid to express what's on their mind, and I don't think that does anybody justice. Conversation is fine as long as it's not confrontation, So,
it's just totally the dog whistle, man. I very smart people told me that expression where you really hear, you can feel when you start seeing people who really have no business owning apartments, or commercial buildings or something, suddenly thinking it makes total sense for them with no experience to do this and buy in and spend their hard-earned money on it. It just makes me wonder, like, if it's like the last guy in. Are you the last guy in? Are you the last greater fool? I don't know for a fact if that's the case. I just know it feels the same way it's felt in 1987 and then again in 2006. It feels to me like some sort of a bubble where everybody just, no one can remember what happens when it goes wrong. Everybody just thinks, that's a pretty house. I think I'll just pay full price plus 25,000 right now because, what could go wrong?
Yeah, roll the dice, whatever. 2020 is already 2020. So now I agree with you. I think it's cyclical, and I think everything leans into each other more than people let on. We see it in my world all the time. In the world of insurance, there's a $142 billion bet right now on multifamily. They repeated what they did in 2008, which is a terrible thing, because if multifamily goes or depreciates enough, and there is a gully or even further, they're going to lose their shorts, and it'll affect insurance rates. It'll affect investor outcome. It'll affect a lot of things. And it does depend on real estate, job security, and confidence. That's why I loved the conversation you brought today, because real estate is a big deal. It's probably the largest purchase any of us will ever make in our lives. The house, or even if it's investment property, that's a step beyond. But having the confidence to do that and know that you're committed to the community, I think allows you to kind of ride out and maybe dispel the myth that you can't make it through crisis periods, 2006, 2008, 2009, or now 2020 with this, who knows where the unemployment's going to land us. It is what it is, and I don't want to get political on it, but you are completely right, and I really value and appreciate you sharing that thought with us.
Well, I hope I'm wrong, but it's just a gut feeling, and I try to never get a swelled head about any of this type of thing, but I definitely have been cited by friends of mine who I feel are smarter than me as somebody who's very good at sensing when this type of cycle is happening, and being able to get out of the weeds and look around and think, uh-oh, the ice is cracking, and know, when it's safe to come out and when it's not. Like right now, I would not, personally, I wouldn't. People offer me different kinds of real estate deals all the time, and none of them are good deals. It's like, how would you like to buy these 12 units for $800,000? Like, last time I bought 12 units, it was $350,000, and it didn't make much money. Why would I buy it for $800,000?
Yeah.
And I can just, when it starts making sense, when you can't just do it on the back of an envelope, and you've got to work really hard to make the numbers work, the numbers don't work. That's why they don't work. That's why you're having so much trouble scratching it out on a notepad, is that there's just nothing there. And if you have to buy something because you're doing a 1031 exchange or an opportunity fund or something like that to avoid taxes, that's a whole other story. But I have a friend who probably makes $5 million a year selling apartments, a real smart guy. And I remember telling him I was going to sell a property, and I was going to have like a $500,000 tax hit if I didn't find a replacement property. And he just looked at me and he said, well, you can either pay the 500,000 or you can overpay by 500,000. Those are your two options in this market. I thought, wow.
It's pretty straightforward. 6 in one hand, half a dozen in the other.
Yeah. So it's interesting, it's an interesting time. And I don't pretend to have any idea what other people should do. I just know that for me, I'm hanging back. And a friend of mine said to me, a guy who retired at 35 told me that from real estate in California. He said the other day, I was saying, I just don't see anything to buy. I'm looking around. I don't ever see anything that looks appealing. And he looked at me and he goes, if I were you, I would turn off your phone for 3 years, watch your kids grow up, play ball with them, read them books, go on hikes, and in 3 years, turn your phone back on and buy everything in sight. You said that about a year ago.
No.
So that's 2 years from now. And I mean, whoever becomes president, that's a whole other story, but they're inheriting basically a very dismal situation with huge national debt, lots of corruption, lots of ugly, weird stuff that's going to be, a weight on the country for a while. And it's either going to be, the Democrats trying to clean up a problem, or the Republicans doing whatever they're going to do with the problem. But it's going to be a problem for whoever's the next president, and it's going to go on for years. And it's going to really depend on, a lot of it will depend on what they do, how they do it, and how they communicate it to the world.
Problem is a problem, regardless of how you look at it. And I think your friend's right. You've got an opportunity to watch your kids grow and look at the positivity and amongst the chaos. So, more power to you. I appreciate that.
Oh, thank you. Well, I know you're the same way. So.
Well, Phil, I really appreciate not only you being willing to do this interview today, but allowing us some perspective into your world and kind of what drives you and your passion. So thank you for sharing that with us. I will make sure that we share out all of your media info. So if you want to send me over anything like a bio or anything coming up, definitely let me know about that. Okay.
Sure. Thank you. And also I want to put in a plug for you, which is that I've been doing this for 35 years. and I've never met a better insurance agent than Adam Griggs. So there you go.
Well, I appreciate that. Now I'm blushing.
Awesome.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I appreciate you, Phil.
Well, you too, man.